I think few comedy specials have the same rewatchability as James Acaster's Repertoire. Not only are the jokes funny, but Repertoire is so much more than just jokes. It tells a story. I don't believe I've ever seen another comedy special quite like it. Sure, many comedians tell stories as their jokes, but they're not stringed together following a common narrative like in Repertoire. Added to this, the stories and jokes Acaster tells during his stand-up span across all 4 episodes of Repertoire, which creates a great viewer experience. What I wanted to do in this video is talk about the story of which Repertoire is centered around, and later on propose a way that this story can be rearranged to change the feel of the special. To do this, we first have to look at each separate episode. Disclaimer. During the video I will talk about the special as if every story Acaster tells on stage is 100% true, and not differentiate between the real James Acaster and his stage persona. In the first episode, Recognize, the story around which the episode is structured is Acaster being an undercover cop in a gang that sells drugs to stand-up comedians. Most of the jokes in the episode are structured around this story. Like, for example, one of my favorite bits from the entire special, the podcast.
Say your prayers, say your prayers, say your prayers! When it kicks off, it's going to shout out, say your prayers or what?
This structure gives the entire episode a sort of flow, but the story also accomplishes something else. It naturally winds down to questions of individuality, where Acaster questions his whole personality.
Cop and the robber? I know where to put my head. I've been undercover so long.
In the second episode, Represent, the episode is structured around Acaster going to jury duty. Once again, most of the jokes are structured around this story and branch into either short or long anecdotes, like for example the sloth story.
A goose. And the goose clip-clopped up to the tree, clip-clop barking at all the cats, clip-clop, clip-clop.
The second episode also deals with the underlying story of being a little Christian kid, having a breakdown and ending the episode with the Christingle service. In the third episode, Reset, the episode revolves around Acaster's bogus honey company. The same structure applies here, where individual jokes are intertwined with the story. It's also worth mentioning that most of the jokes in this episode are about Britain and British identity.
Everyone in Britain got in a big old boat and we set sail and we robbed, and this will sound far-fetched, everyone in the world!
The same can be said for other episodes as well, where most of the jokes follow a common theme, but it's in the third episode where it's most apparent. Now, the last episode of the special, Recap, is easily my favorite. This is mostly due to the first 15 minutes, which contain some of my favorite jokes from the entire special. Examples of this are the telesale celebrity bit.
I'm a huge fan, sign my neck. I'll be like, look mate, now's not a very convenient time. It'll be like, oh, that's exactly what you said in your phone call.
The bread research.
There's no such thing as prawn bread. So the origin of prawn toast remains a mystery.
And Shrove Tuesday.
My favourite part of Pancake Day is the pancake flip. Dramatic as all hell. I love it.
Added to this, the episode has one of the best intros to a comedy show ever.
I mean, you want to be as productive as you can be on any given day, obviously anyone does, but it's hard not to beat yourself up, you know?
After this fantastic start, he ends up at the story of the episode, which is that of being a lollipop man in the witness protection program, which he briefly set up in the third episode. Now that I've briefly run through the different stories of each episode, I want to discuss the topic of this video. The idea for this video mainly came from this.
Shortly after that, I got promoted again. A lot of you will know this, but it goes lollipop man, community support officer, undercover cop.
When I rewatched Repertoire for maybe the 5th time, I started thinking about why the story isn't chronological. It was obvious why the episodes were put in that order for all of the jokes and callbacks to work properly, but it still felt a bit weird that such a well-structured special built around a narrative wasn't chronological. So I decided to rewatch it again following the chronology of the story, which would be as follows: Bogus Honey Company, Lollipop Man in the Witness Protection Program, Undercover Cop, and finishing off with being on jury duty. So I started at the third episode, Reset, and watched the whole special all the way through. At the end, my appreciation of James Acaster's comedy had almost doubled. Even though the jokes were the same, it felt like a completely different special. Firstly, I would point out that the beginning of the third episode feels like the most natural intro to a show, with fellow comedians introducing him onto the stage while he assembles different stage props.
Are you ready for your next act?
Well, he's a troubadour. I don't know why I said that, or really what it is.
Acaster then begins the show by thanking the audience for being there.
I hoped it'd be you. I did. On the way here, I said out loud, hope it's them.
If you also look at the final part of episode 2, which in the chronological order would be the last episode, it feels like the most natural ending, with Acaster tearing down the set and then finishing off with a Christingle service in blackout. Secondly, I want to look at the story of the special through the lens of morality. If you start at the third episode, Acaster is a criminal in a sense, running a bogus company. Through the second half of the episode and episode 4, he slowly increases his level of morality by becoming a lollipop man and serving the community. His morality slowly increases through a series of stories about different people in his life who have been extremely good or the worst.
It was the worst. The worst. And I do not say that lightly, by the way. There's over 7 billion people in the world. He's my best guess for the worst.
In episode 1, we then see Acaster becoming an undercover cop, being so sure of his moral compass that he is able to hang out with criminals while still doing his job. Through the episode, he slowly loses his sense of identity, becoming more and more unsure of his moral compass as he dives into his work at the cost of his relationships. In the last episode, chronologically, episode 2, he then has to use his moral compass to judge another human as part of a jury, and his confusion surrounding his own morality and individuality sends him into a mental breakdown, ultimately resulting in Acaster returning to the morality of his young Christian self.
When you're a little Christian boy, everything's nice. It's exactly where it should be, and it makes sense. When you grow up, it should get easier, but it gets harder, you get more scared and more doubtful.
Since the first time I watched the special in this order, my appreciation for Acaster's style of comedy has grown massively. This order has strangely become my preferred way of watching Repertoire. It feels like I get the absolute maximum out of the special. Now, like I said earlier, for some of the jokes to work, you have to watch the special in the original order. But when you have a good understanding of the different callbacks and jokes, I would suggest that you watch it by starting on the third episode, which is coincidentally named Reset.